So you have some shotgun quests, and you don't like the range of buckshot rounds. Can slugs be a good alternative to treat the weapon like a rifle?
Already there. Not again.
One down.
Players?
He's dead.
Another one?
He's dead too. He's one down. He's dead. Wish I knew how far away. He's looking at us.
No! Well, maybe you
I
can.
think I dropped him.
Let's look a little deeper.
Where the hell is he?
Hello and welcome to my 12th weapon guide for Escape from Tarkov. My name is Freakatoid, and today we'll be covering part 3 of the shotgun series. This time around, we're going to cover the slug rounds, including the new Taz slug ammo introduced in patch 0.16. There is a lot that is generally not known about these rounds, and from the things that I've discovered about them during my testing for this video, I can certainly understand why. To start with, I'm going to cover the slug rounds themselves. After going over each slug's general stats, purpose, and effectiveness, I will then get into what I would consider the 3 major questions or issues that people have regarding slugs as a whole. And I will do my best to explain what happened during my research and testing that could answer, or at the very least explain what is going on with these issues. Without further ado, let's get started. To start, I will go ahead and give a base description of slug rounds, in case anybody is unfamiliar with them. As far as shotguns are concerned, most of the base ammo you see people talking about is buckshot. These rounds fire multiple projectiles in a varying spread that is both more forgiving and arguably increases effectiveness at closer ranges. Slug rounds are much different. These rounds are pretty much just a very large bullet that is loaded into a shotgun that kinda turns it into a very high damage marksman rifle. In real life, slug rounds can reach out to some very impressive ranges. This is translated well in Tarkov, as the drop with these rounds are much less dramatic than the spread shot. In Tarkov, there are 11 different slug rounds to choose from. Wait, scratch this one out for now. I'll explain that thing in a bit. There are 10 different slug rounds in the game to choose from. These all vary from each other in damage, penetration, armor damage, and drop-off by a considerable amount. In fact, the selection of slug rounds alone varies about as much as the pistol calibers in this game. We'll cover each of these slugs in a second, but let's briefly get this particular ammo out of the way. Dual Sabot slugs are one of the first rounds that I wanted to see, as it is a unique slug that actually has 2 projectiles. The damage and penetration is actually comparable to some of the middle-of-the-road slugs you have available, but what sets this round apart is the combination of high armor damage with double the projectiles. In theory, this round would offer a long-range option for fighting armor that has an additional chance of penetrating armor and sending some pretty significant damage through. The problem is that the game seems to treat this round like a spread shot. I'm sure there's a better term for what this round is, but it certainly does not have the precision of a slug round. I do a small demo of this on a short video on my channel, but to make a long story short, it has the spread of all the other buckshot rounds in this game. This makes Dual Sabot one of the most inconsistent rounds in the entire game, and I heavily advise you avoid this round at all costs. I need to be clear here. I'm not sure if this is the intended behavior that BSG wanted with these rounds, but right now, it's just not viable in my opinion. Lead slugs are the very first slug rounds you can buy from traders. Both Skier and Peacekeeper will sell them to you right at the very start of the game, and once you unlock Jaeger from the quest Introduction, he will sell them to you as well. If you had to pick the most basic slug round in the game, this would be the one. With a damage of 167 and a penetration of 15, it doesn't seem that impressive at first glance. It does deal an impressive 55% armor damage, which can destroy level 2 and 3 armor relatively fast, but it will still take a few shots. If you're using these rounds at the very beginning of wipe, they can be pretty effective, but it's still a bit challenging to use. It's one of the only early game slugs that doesn't have any additional recoil penalty, so using this in a fast-firing shotgun is actually not a bad idea. This slug round, like many other early game rounds, does fall out of usefulness very quickly, so we will move on. Compared to lead slugs, the Paleva slugs have a significant recoil reduction and a slight penetration power advantage at the cost of a little bit of damage. You'll unlock the Paleva 3 slugs very early on as soon as you unlock Jaeger. These rounds have a damage of 140 and a penetration power of 17, meaning it has slightly better first shot penetration chance against level 2 armor, and will perform better than slug rounds against higher tiers of armor where you'll need multiple shots to get through. Don't worry too much about the lesser damage, as 140 is still more than enough for a one-shot thorax if it penetrates armor. All you gotta worry about is that continuous leg and arm shots aren't as effective. Paleva 6U rounds are a direct, but only slight upgrade over the Paleva 3. You'll unlock them after increasing Jaeger's loyalty level to 2. These rounds deal 150 damage with a penetration power of 20. This means it will almost always penetrate level 2 armor on the first shot, which is very effective on most scavs. You will get a little more armor damage as well, but there is a slight trade-off with the recoil reduction. These two rounds are very good options if you want the best advantage against armor in the early game, and the recoil reduction, however slight, will help you when firing the semi-auto shotguns you'll have available to you. If the slight decrease in damage is not what you're looking for in slugs, then perhaps we should look at Grizzly 40 and Copper Sabot rounds. These rounds offer a decent increase to damage over the lead slugs that also retain the bleed chance. Grizzly 40 will be the first one you have access to, and it will be available immediately with Jaeger. It has a damage of 190 and a penetration value of 12. While it's not really all that effective with armor, that high base damage means you can use this round to hit the arms or legs of a target that may not be fully exposing themselves and really screw them over. Be advised that there is a recoil penalty that these rounds cause, so be forewarned if you spray with them. Copper Sabot rounds are a very good upgrade to Grizzly 40, having better stats across the board. Rocking a damage of 206 and a penetration power of 14, you essentially have lead slugs with more base damage and much higher bleed chances. The recoil penalty is also lesser than the Grizzly 40, but you still have to bear it in mind. It's essentially a better form of Grizzly 40, and is the third highest damage slug round that doesn't sacrifice all of its penetration power. You'll unlock this at loyalty level 2 Jaeger, but to be quite honest with you, all the previous slug rounds will be lacking in comparison to the next slug round I'll talk about. FTX custom light slugs are perhaps the best upgrade to slug rounds you'll have available once you unlock Jaeger loyalty level 2. It takes the benefits of all the previous types of slugs and creates the best of both worlds. It boasts improved damage, penetration, and a massive recoil reduction that is greater than any slug round in the game. Its exact stats post 183 damage and a penetration power of 20, mimicking the penetration of Paleva 6U without the lower damage output. It's also one of the faster slugs in the game, which means any shot taking over significant range will feel more responsive. This slug round is one of my personal favorites for shotgun questing in the early wipe. It has a solid, all-around performance and is quite easy to obtain. It has a solid 50% armor damage alongside its other advantages, which makes it able to do just about anything you need it to do. The only thing that this slug round does not do is cause any form of bleeding. That is easily something you can look past, considering it excels at everything else. It's the ultimate jack-of-all-trades slug round. And now that we have covered the FTX custom slugs, The remaining slugs for 12 gauge are much more specialized from here. If you wanted to use slugs as a form of long-ranged leg meta, then SuperFormance and RIP slugs are your two best choices. They trade off any form of significant armor penetration to maximize the damage they deal to flesh. Armor damage is at an all-time low with these rounds, having only slightly more than 10%. Even level 3 protection will stop this round in its tracks. Starting off with SuperFormance, these rounds deal 220 damage with a penetration power of only 5. Seriously, don't try to punch through someone's armor with this ammo. To make matters worse, this round likes to go far. Like, really far.
Other head, that's what it was. The other head.
This looks like a good thing at first, but this round in particular gets out of whack after 30 meters. I will go into much greater detail on this particular behavior later, but if you felt like this round wasn't going where you aimed, just know you're not going crazy. And this round is the worst of it. The upside is that this round actually has a slight reduction to recoil, and you can spam this round pretty steadily with the right shotguns. RIP slugs are up next, and these things are very rare and very hard to come by in great quantities. The box ammo you can find of this in raid only holds 5 shells, and unless you kill a raider that is using a shotgun, you won't find it on normal scavs. It deals a colossal 265 damage with a pitiful penetration power of 2. Seriously, just 2. I don't know how many times you need to shoot someone with, let's say, level 4 armor before it finally penetrates, but to be honest with you, just don't. RIP rounds do actually have one thing going for it, and it's that it's the fastest dropping slug round in the game. This doesn't seem like a positive trait, but it makes RIP rounds the easiest to aim within 100 meters. Spamming this round is made a bit difficult by the addition of a plus 35 recoil penalty, so having some ability to control the recoil yourself will do you a lot of good. Both SuperFormance and RIP rounds are capable of taking out PMCs and scabs with only 3 shots to the leg, and this extends to a pretty significant range. Just be aware that these rounds do not forgive you if you don't hit exposed body parts. .50 BMG and AP-20 slugs are going to be where a great majority of players gravitate toward. These slugs hold the highest armor penetration of all the 12 gauge slugs. They also manage to hold quite a lot of base damage as well, but not enough to beat the previously discussed rounds at their own game. .50 BMG slugs are going to be the more common round you see players fighting with, as they are the only of the 2 armor-piercing slugs that you can actually buy as of the current patch. Boasting an impressive damage of 197 and a penetration power of 26, these rounds have solid first round performance against level 3 armor, and the armor damage of 57% helps to make short work of level 4 armor. Its real downside is that .50 BMG does have a pretty significant recoil penalty of plus 25, but it's not that much of a problem with some recoil control practice. But it's an absolute game changer when used against scavs, as most will go down in very few if not a single shot to the thorax. It doesn't hurt to have the mindset of firing a couple of shots into the target anyway, just to be sure. AP-20 is a whole other level of slug round, and honestly, it's in a league of its own as far as 12 gauge is concerned. With a respectable 164 base damage and a penetration power of 37, level 4 armor can commonly be ignored within the first 2 shots. Armor damage is a whopping 65% as well, making short work of high-rated armor plates with just a few shots. Almost all scavs can be reliably one-shotted, and PMCs in the early to mid-game aren't much safer. The best part about AP-20 is that it doesn't even matter which shotgun you use. It's still a riot. The trade-off is the same as .50 BMG, but to a larger degree. This round has a recoil penalty of plus 50, so you really gotta make sure your shots are hitting accurately. because spamming AP-20 will make your shotguns flail all around whether you like it or not. Once again, these rounds are going to be the go-to for most players taking shotgun slugs into a raid, as the consistency they offer is quite frankly unmatched in terms of killing potential. Moving on to the first slug of the Taz, we have the Devastator rounds. These are the RIP slugs of the 20 gauge category, but they are actually a little bit special. You see, these rounds actually deal about as much damage as the buckshot, and the newly introduced flechette rounds that the Taz can dish out. It has a damage of 198 with a penetration of only 5. Basic 7.5mm buckshot for the Taz has a maximum damage of 208. So while these rounds are nearly identical in terms of damage, Taz buckshot still offers more consistency, since missing a few pellets doesn't really matter too much.
They're dead.
Missing the Devastator slug means you missed out on all of your damage. Using these for leg meta isn't the greatest plan either, as the Taz has the slowest rate of fire of any of the shotguns in the game, along with Devastator rounds requiring 4 leg shots to bring down a single target, which could damn near be your entire mag even with the large magazine options. If it's all you have to work with, then do your best. I personally do not recommend this slug round, and it's really all I have to say on the matter.
There is one.
Paleva 3, Paleva 6U, and Star Slugs are all pretty much the same thing. There is no major difference between the amount of damage they do, the penetration power they have, or the armor damage percent that they have. The one very nice quality of these slug rounds is that you should have absolutely no problem being accurate with them. For some reason, the Taz slugs are incredibly consistent and honestly a bit fun to use. It's not meta by any means, but at least it never feels like the round doesn't go where you wanted it to. The rounds aren't that great, but if you wanted to treat this like a mini marksman rifle, you can. Just know that the effective range is essentially 50 to 60 meters. Sniping is a bit difficult because these things drop very fast. Dangerous Game and TSS AP slugs are where the fun begins. These rounds, recently introduced in patch point 16, are actually fairly good, and weirdly, can be an improvement to 12 gauge slugs in the early portions in the game. Dangerous Games are up first, and they came to play. With a damage of 143 and a penetration power of 25, these things are essentially the 50 BMG slugs of the Taz. Around the time you unlock these rounds for a barter trade, the highest armor penetration available for 12 gauge is the FTX custom slugs, with a penetration power of 20. Even the armor damage doesn't slouch with an impressive 47%. Like 50 BMG, these rounds can take on level 3 armor pretty damn well, needing only a few, if not one shot, to level 3 armor to kill. The recoil penalty of plus 40% these rounds come with is completely negligible. You can ignore it, because the slug rounds need to go through the bolt action anyways. You can find these rounds in packs, in raid, and even some on scavs, which is kind of scary now that I think about it. TSS AP slugs are basically the same story. Once the barter trade for these rounds is available, it outshines the highest penetrating 12 gauge slug that also comes with it, 50 BMG in this case. With a damage of 155 and a whopping 30 penetration power, these slugs are no joke. Scavs are a breeze, and unprepared players will be completely caught off guard when you start doing significant damage with a damn Taz. These rounds also found in packs, so make sure to stock up on them when you can. It's just a little fun thing to mess around with every so often, even if it's not the most effective way to play this game. The KS-23 slugs, also known as Barrikada or barricade rounds, are monsters. These rounds are actually aligned perfectly with the sights on the KS-23, because it's one of the only shotguns in the game that is actually zeroed to its slug round instead of the spread shot. You can seriously get some impressive snipes with this slug round.
Wait a minute, is that, hold on, I see the sniper scav all the way over there. I'm going to do an impossible shot.
2 meters on the nose.
Accuracy and range aren't the only things going for this round, however, because it has terrifyingly balanced stats for a slug round. Dealing a very nice 192 damage with 39 penetration power means that level 4 armor never stood a chance. With a massive armor damage percentage of 75%, it doesn't take many more shots to reduce that class 5 plate to atoms. Now, admittedly, this round is kind of in Arena. Most people are slapping on some of the highest plates they can, normally making it to class 4 or 5 with ease. In regular Tarkov, however, it can put down many targets, but at the same time, it can't. The weakest part about these particular slug rounds are the shotgun that is used in. The KS-23 suffers from having a very small tube mag, and thus not a ton of available follow-up shots. It also doesn't have a very fast fire rate, so follow-up shots do take slightly longer than something like a pump-action shotgun in 12 gauge. Still, these rounds have the most consistent one-shot ability of all the slug rounds in the game. So, if that's what you want, it's what you'll get. When I started to use slug rounds and get a general feel for them, I had some difficulties. That it's not true. That is ridiculous. Are you watching this, man? This was the glaring one. But in total, I had 3 major problems that I had questions about. 1, why would I use shotguns over rifles? 2, how do slugs fare against armor? And the one that we'll cover now, why are these slugs so damn inaccurate? One of the first glaring issues you may come across with slug rounds is that it's seemingly very inaccurate. Plenty of content creators who I asked about slugs had various different takes on what was actually going on. Some said the damage fall off was so severe it just didn't do much damage out to a certain point. Others said that the slug rounds had a level of randomness similar to buckshot rounds, and that the accuracy bonus only helped minimally. A handful of people didn't even seem to have any problems with the slug rounds at all. I don't fault them for thinking like this, because quite honestly, the truth was very confusing. Slugs aren't exactly the most used ammo in Tarkov anyways, so there isn't a whole lot of people who would even notice any issues like this. First things first, slug rounds are currently the most precise rounds in the game. Now I know you got a look on your face that's making you question my credibility here, but give me a moment to explain. In this particular case, when I talk about precision, I'm talking about the spread, bloom, or what the MOA stat is supposed to determine. All slug rounds, apart from the dual Sabot problem child, has perfect precision, meaning that shooting at the exact same spot on a target will result in arrow-splitting arrow level of accuracy. Slug rounds seem to defy MOA just like the buckshot rounds, which means once again, we can completely ignore that stat. I even put this to the test against an M700 at 150 meters, and the result was nearly identical. While I have this image up, I can talk about the next quirk about slugs, which is their complete disregard for optics. You see how neatly I placed the slug rounds above the M700 bullet holes to make it nice and neat? Yeah, that wasn't me. In fact, where the reticle currently sits in this image is where I shot the slug rounds from. Also, yes, this was still fired from 150 meters away. To be specific, this was AP-20 fired out of an MP-155 using the lowest 34mm mount for a scope that I could possibly find. Do you think that's nuts? Check this image out, which is all the different slugs being fired from the exact same height from one another at 150 meters. They are all drastically different from each other, which is another reason these slugs felt so random when you alternated between them. The next question is, what the hell? Why? I had this question as well, and my first thought was that the bullet velocity would place all of these slugs relatively close to where they ended up on this test. Lowest velocity to the lowest hitting slug round, right? Well, not really. It's kinda right, but something else was clearly going on to make some of these fall shorter than each other. The answer turned out to be a hidden statistic in the game, which mimics a real-life term known as the ballistic coefficient. What is the ballistic coefficient? The ballistic coefficient is a measure of the negative ejectile found by mass. Look, it involves math. A ton of math that I don't quite understand myself. All you need to know is that this hidden stat is responsible for bullet drop and fall-off damage for every single round in the game. The general rule is that the lower the number is, the worse the bullet drop is. Normally, this number is pretty similar across the same caliber, like the 5.56 for example. This means you can expect the same level of drop you'll have to account for, no matter how many different 5.56 rounds that you use. Slug rounds are so dramatically different from one another that we go from this round that wants to make an any % speed run into the ground, to this one that wants to defy gravity. This hidden stat, combined with bullet velocity, is part of the explanation I can give as to why these slug rounds hit so differently from one another. But there is one more thing to address, which is why some of these rounds are hitting above the 50-meter zero at 150 meters. The final reason that these slugs are so damn inaccurate is that the sights are not trying to tell you where the slug rounds are going to hit. On all shotguns, except for the MTS revolver shotgun and the KS-23, any sight, including the iron sights, are zeroed for 7mm buckshot rounds. This means that shotguns are showing you the reticle for its slowest, fastest falling ammo possible. Slug rounds are so much faster and so much slower to drop that aiming for the reticle past 25 meters is completely the wrong move to make. This is the reason that slugs may have felt like they did no damage past a certain range. And the reason you missed that easy 50-meter headshot on that player was because the round went well above what you were aiming for. To make matters worse, the higher you mount a sight on your shotgun, the worse this disparity gets. Low-mounted, 25-meter zeroed microdots help alleviate this issue, but out to longer ranges, it's still a problem. Even the ribbed barrels, which are supposed to work like an improved iron sight for shotguns, are still affected past a certain threshold. The single greatest solution that I found to using any sight or scope was to attach a laser as close to the barrel of the shotgun as possible. Within 60 meters, you can use the laser to accurately show you how high the round will end up on your reticle, no matter which slug you were using. If you want to know all the ranges where the slug rounds seem to return to the center of the reticle, here are the lists. The starting bullet velocity of all the unmodified shotguns seem to fit certain categories. Just keep in mind that any height difference between sights will actually affect the ranges that I show you here, along with any barrel changes that affect bullet velocity. The second major issue of slug rounds was its performance against armor. Obviously, rounds like AP-20 and 50 BMG have little problems getting through up to Class 4 armor with ease, but most of the other slugs don't have a one-shot potential on Class 3 armor. The TAS and the KS-23 rely a bit on their ability to kill on the first shot, because you will more than likely not have enough time to follow up with a second. As a result, you want to use the strongest ammo possible. With 12 gauge, you do have the ability to use shotguns that are both full auto and semi-auto, so rounds that may not penetrate armor on the first shot can be worked around. Rounds like FTX custom slugs are some of the best slug you can get your hands on at Loyalty Level 2 Jaeger, and admittedly, they are pretty good at dealing with scavs. The issue is that these rounds simply don't cut it against the kind of armor that players will be wearing, and will require multiple shots to their armor in order to deal any significant damage. Again, AP-20 and 50 BMG are the best, but even against Class 5 and Class 6 armor, it will take quite a few shots in order to penetrate. RIP and SuperFormance attempts to give shotguns a leg meta option, but to be perfectly honest, it doesn't do that too well either. 3 shots to kill from the leg sounds good on paper, but you'll find in most fights that you are less reliable against an enemy in cover. RIP rounds do actually have a surprising aspect about them that puts them in a pretty consistent spot against the highest levels of armor. It would appear that although the armor plate itself doesn't take too much damage from all RIP shots, the player will actually take a decent amount of blunt damage that will kill with enough persistence. In fact, against a level 6 plate, these things actually killed the player before AP-20 would have penetrated. In general, good armor does prevent slug rounds from piercing. Whenever you pick between the higher damage slugs and the higher piercing slugs, you have to keep in mind what your plan is against somebody with armor you can't actually beat. If push comes to shove, shooting the legs with just about any of the slugs will deal a ton of damage. So with the fight against high tier armor being less than ideal, and the leg meta not being the best option, what is the slug round's best trait? When I thought about this question, I really had to look at the overall stats and compare them to other weapons in the games. What seemed to stand out more than anything was that incredible amount of damage they dealt. Literally any slug that deals even a slightly reduced amount of damage is enough to put them down with one clean shot to the thorax. This is the main appeal. The very large one-shot opportunity at a fairly decent range so long as you can aim it. It seemed a bit too familiar with how a bolt-action rifle is played. It was that comparison that really clicked for me. Shotgun slugs are the higher damage version of the bolt-action rifle. Now, obviously there's a bit more to it. Slugs can't consistently reach as far as a sniper rifle, and they certainly are harder to use due to its slower velocity at medium ranges. But the type of playstyle that would fit a slug shotgun is similar to when you're fighting with a bolt action. Shotguns present some rates that are actually better suited to fight at medium ranges in comparison as well. Their fire rate is one of the most dramatically different things that give them a big advantage. You're actually able to take a few shots to an unsuspecting target before they have time to react, which you really aren't able to do with a bolt action without needing to hide behind some serious concealment or cover. You also have that ability to one-shot to the thorax, which none of the other sniper rounds apart from 338 Lapua can actually manage. Having a consistent one-shot capability up to class 4 armor with that increased rate of fire can be far deadlier than you think. Shotguns also have the advantage of being lighter, with a generally better ammo capacity. And unlike with bolt-action rifles, the single round reloading is generally much quicker and very convenient. Because of the way that shotguns currently ignore the MOA stat and accuracy is not a stat you need to worry about, having a suppressed weapon with all the previous capabilities can be a force to be reckoned with. So that's my take on a slug round's best use. A faster, close to medium range focused marksman. A very versatile, mobile, and capable one-shot potential for a weapon that fires faster than a bolt action, with options for semi and full auto across different guns. You, just gotta get used to that zeroing problem they have. And because I'm not sure where to put this little fun fact, the Saiga 12 has some slight horizontal misalignment that gets worse with range. The testing that I did for this video was very involved, and every bit of data that I could not reasonably test would have not have been possible without the help of Tarkov Gunsmith. I have to recognize them for the assistance that they gave me in regards to showing the trajectory that slugs traveled, along with giving me the up-to-date information on ballistic coefficient stats that let me give you a better explanation as to the weirdness that these rounds certainly have given Tarkov players time and time again. If you want more detailed information about slug rounds, or even any of Tarkov's related ballistics information, go check them out. I was not sponsored by them in any way, shape, or form. I just recommend them that much to somebody who wants to learn more. At the moment, slug rounds are not a particular favorite among the Tarkov community. With how long these rounds have been behaving so wildly, and how different they are from other weapon choices, it's easy to see why. With the quests in the game that require you to use shotguns, and some of them taking place on large open maps, it's important to know that it may be necessary, or at least favorable, to use slugs. I decided to ask other content creators about if they choose to use slug rounds during these quests, which ones, and why.
It depends how far away I'm gonna be from the person. Usually I use Piranha or Flechette if it's a really closer in fight. If I know I'm gonna be getting into closer in fights, and then AP-20 or 50 BMG slugs if it's gonna be a little further away. All of those rounds have their use case, you know.
It depends. Depends on how you, what kind of quest you're looking at. Depends on how you want to play. If you want to, like, you could put, like, for the headshot ones, sometimes I find it easier just to put a scope on a shotgun and use slugs. But if it's just like, you know, to kill scavs with 12 gauge, just use buckshot. It's cheaper.
To be honest with you, I haven't used slugs in a long time when it comes down to shotgun quests. I used to love using AP-20 slugs, anything with high pen, but slugs don't really hit like that they used to. I don't know, it's really weird. Any type of like flechette rounds, like anything with widespread is just so much better nowadays compared to slug. In my own opinion, when it comes down to questing, takes down the opponent a lot quicker. Honestly, it's a problem with the slugs itself. Doesn't give you enough damage for it.
Which slug rounds do you prefer to use and why? 50 BMG is good. It has decent armor pen. 50 BMG slugs are good. AP-20s are good. Yeah, that's pretty much it. That's all I got really in terms of top tier slugs that you should probably use. But the only thing is you can't get 50 BMG until later.
BMG gives you an accuracy increase. But yeah, AP-20 or the BMG 50s, they do give good accuracy. Or just go Magnum Buck. I've had the best in terms of like a flash round.
My go-to slugs, honestly, would be the 50 BMG slug. 50 BMG slug or probably AP-20. I'm not really too knowledgeable when it comes down to what slug to use, though.
Do you have any advice for someone who hasn't used slug rounds yet? Yeah, be accurate. Hit your shots. If you don't think you can hit your shots, then switch back to pellets or flechettes. Because the cone in which you hit your shots with pellets or flechettes is a lot wider than the slugs. Because it's just one projectile, just like a bullet.
Do you have advice for someone who hasn't used a slug round yet, and even if not, do so? To be honest with you, slug rounds are very, very good to be utilized, but they have certain things with, like, its range. You just gotta know how to calibrate and how to actually, you know, pinpoint it, and you're good.
So that's it. That completes the shotgun series. I can finally say I can actually use these damn things with good results now that I've taken a look at everything, and I hope you can as well. A quick reminder to earlier in the video when I told you about the whole zeroing problem, use a laser as your reticle. It's the best way I found you can use slugs within 60 meters. If BSG ever gets around to fixing the jank that shotguns are currently made out of, I think I owe it all to you to come back and cover what is fixed or new. In the end, the only thing I truly care about is that those shotgun quests will be much easier for you now. So I hope I get a good job of making shotguns make sense, even though they don't. I hope you enjoyed the video and perhaps learned something new. Be sure to subscribe.